Full disclosure, I apologize if this video is a few days late, but in my defense, not every Friday the 13th movie takes place on Friday the 13th. Think about it.
Warning. Due to the graphic nature of this content, viewer aggression is advised.
Happy Friday the 13th! In this episode, I'm going to talk about the one kill that almost killed Friday the 13th. In this video, I'm going to attempt to explain how one censored Friday the 13th kill reveals the real rules of movie violence. And why modern horror movies look the way they do. Can you guess what it is? Stay tuned to find out. Things are going to get ugly. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for clicking on my video.
He said he was on the verge of a discovery so terrific that he doubted his own sanity. There was a strange look in his eyes, a mystery.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I'm Chris Mason, aka Mr. Flickster, here to talk motion pictures.
Mr. Flickster.
One kill in Friday the 13th Part 7 nearly pushed the franchise into oblivion. So, why did this kill nearly end the franchise? Not because it was more violent than movies today. Not because it went too far. Not even because excessive nudity. Let me explain. It forced viewers to feel the violence. And that distinction explains why modern horror movies look the way they do today. Here's the kill that broke the rules. It's the sleeping bag kill. Even after the gore was taken out of it.
I had never really been interested in directing a Friday the 13th movie. And it dawned on me, maybe we could do something that they haven't done before with the character and the story.
I know it doesn't look like much today, but the original version looked very different.
Now, the sleeping bag wasn't so much of a gore makeup. It was more of a violent thing.
The MPAA didn't censor gore. It censored viewer alignment. They're invisible, inconsistent, unaccountable, with no clear rules. Decisions are delivered after the damage is done.
There was a renaissance in makeup effects during that period. Everybody was doing stuff.
When one of the kills happened, they would always film everything.
The MPAA operated less as a regulator and more like an off-screen killer, Sort of like another horror villain I know. How ironic.
Scenes or parts of scenes that at one time existed that are far gorier. We kept sending it back, so I'd do the notes, get it back, then we'd get it back, and there'd be new notes.
Changing the rules of survival mid-scene.
Wait a minute, they didn't mention that scene before, and, you know, they don't make explanations for what they do. They just say, well, no, this scene is no good.
But seriously, though, the MPAA wasn't operating on some sort of rulebook they concocted. There is no rulebook. They were operating on vibes. A brief history with the Friday the 13th franchise. The body count rises. Friday the 13th, 1980. The MPAA allows gore, but forces trims. Numerous cuts were submitted. The violence was presented plainly, but significantly cut down due to the threat of an X rating. The early warning shots were fired. Part 2 and 4, 1981 to 1984. MPAA scrutiny intensifies. Kill scenes get repeatedly cut after filming. Each subsequent sequel required multiple submissions for approval, more than the first. Directors begin shooting decoy gore, a tactic where creators place a scene they know will be cut by censors, intentionally allowing the censors to win, quote-unquote, while assuming the rest of the film passes untouched. Misdirection. The gore itself might be exaggerated to make audiences focus on the shock value, distracting them from plot points or more subtle, disturbing elements. The MPAA wasn't reacting anymore. It was anticipating.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
The breaking point. Part 5 and Part 6. Studios start pre-censoring themselves. Kills get faster. The camera pulls away sooner. Less time spent inside the suffering. Unlike the predecessors. Friday the 13th, Part 7, 1988. The MPAA demands the most cuts in franchise history. Each kill was reduced down to impacts and reactions. The ever-pressing threat of the X rating was over tone, not content. But Part 7, Friday the 13th wasn't pushing boundaries. It was walking on eggshells. And that's what makes the sleeping bag kill so revealing. Even stripped down from gore, it still violated the MPAA's real rule. By the late 80s, the MPAA didn't need to see the blood. They already knew what Friday the 13th was trying to make you feel. So, here's a more in-depth look at the sleeping bag kill. Jason slams a woman in a sleeping bag against a tree. There's no elaborate gore. There's no mystic framing. Just repetition, helplessness, and time in the moment. Director John Carl Beckler, sorry if I butchered that, has also said the MPAA demanded more cuts on Part 7 than any previous entry.
I'd hoped to be able to show a little bit more of what actually happened to Dr. Cruz.
Even though it contained less visible gore.
And we actually saw some of his stomach and intestines pulled out and wrap around the blade.
Literally down to the very end of our battle with the ratings board, that sleeping bag scene just kept coming up.
How's that make sense?
So I just thought it was hysterical. I mean, you know, just look at that bag. It's just oozing blood. And finally, it's almost as if he got too tired and couldn't hit it anymore.
Kane Hodder has gone on record repeatedly saying that the MPAA told them the sleeping bag kill was too sadistic.
John Beekler and I have done quite a few things together. He's one of those guys that I really enjoy working with, and he listens to my input.
Sadism isn't about what happens.
I just wish the movie hadn't been so destroyed by
The MPAA.
the MPAA.
It's about how long you stay in that moment.
Yeah.
There was so many good makeup effects. None of it ended up in the movie. Every single kill in the movie was cut to almost nothing. I started getting pissed off during the take. I swung it a couple times. I felt like I was losing my balance, and the thing was slipping out of my hands. I think that even helped because I really smashed it against a tree.
It's about whether or not the audience is forced to participate emotionally.
It is a popular kill. It happens to be my favorite kill that I've ever performed as Jason, because with the originality and creativity of it. The combination of the latex, the wetness, and the slippery nylon sleeping bag made it almost impossible to grip on.
And I had to rely really on Kane to pick up several gallons of blood and bash it against a tree that had little tiny razor blades in it so that would...
So how did they respond? How else? The threat of an X rating.
And in the movie, of course, you see almost nothing, which every single kill in the movie is cut almost completely out, which is really frustrating.
The end result? That scene was butchered beyond belief. Pun intended. This wasn't about how much violence was shown. It was how long the audience was forced to stay with it. So what are the MPAA's real rules? Then versus now? Back then, with 80 slashers, the violence lingered. Victims were human, young, and therefore vulnerable. The camera didn't flinch. The long takes, stay there. You're with the moment. There was no moral framing for the violence. In other words, it wasn't an act of heroism or anything like that. They were kills for pleasure. And the violence back then was unapologetic. So, what was the MPAA's translation from this? This enjoys suffering. Nowadays, in modern action/horror, the violence is faster. It's framed more as spectacle or lore. And it's often abstracted through CGI, quick cuts, and distant shots. All of this usually gets wrapped up in franchise mythology, prestige aesthetics, and trauma discourse. MPAA translation? Intense but acceptable. Therefore, same brutality, more about spectacle, not substance. This leads me to another issue. Genre hypocrisy. Why horror was targeted, and not other genres like action? Clearly, the MPAA's belief is that horror exists to arouse fear, therefore violence is the point. Therefore, it deserves harsher scrutiny. Action films, meanwhile, were seen more as narratively driven, heroic, morally contextualized, and all about the spectacle. So the end result? 2 identical stabbings, 2 completely different ratings. Make that make sense. Ultimately, blood spurts mattered more in horror. Close-ups were scrutinized. Repetition equaled sadism. Friday the 13th's real crime? It didn't pretend to be anything else. It was proud to be violent, and the box office backed it up. Over time, it earned a reputation of being dangerous for a whole generation. So, what were the MPAA actually afraid of? The MPAA didn't ask, is this too violent? It asked, will the audience feel complicit? In Friday the 13th, usually, the violence is slow, the victims are human and helpless, therefore the audience is trapped in the moment. In modern horror franchises, violence is abstracted, often balancing the need for R-rated intensity and the desire to push for broader PG-13 audiences. Or, the other option, push the boundaries of R ratings to satisfy horror fans. The MPAA didn't hate the gore, they hated the intimacy. So in modern horror movies, films rush you forward before the discomfort sits in. And victims are usually anonymous or some sort of mythical being, pushing the limits of R, Saw, Final Destination. The Saw franchise from 2004 to present that solidified the torture porn subgenre, requiring R ratings for intense sequences of graphic violence and gore. Final Destination, from 2000 to present, was known for elaborate, over-the-top violent death scenes. The series has consistently maintained an R rating for, quote, intense horror violence and gore, and for language, end quote. Legacy sequel ratings: Halloween, Scream. The Halloween reboot trilogy that started in 2018 to 2022 was Blumhouse's version, with a firm R rating, often pushing violence more than the original 1978 classic to satisfy modern audiences. Scream, from 2022 to present day, were more recent entries that maintain the franchise's traditional R rating, balancing meta-commentary with meta-slasher violence. And these movies were way more violent than the originals. The exception, Terrifier. From 2016 to present day, the Terrifier franchise, specifically Terrifier 2 from 2022 and Terrifier 3 from 2024, is a prime example of rejecting the MPAA rating system altogether and releasing these films unrated. The filmmakers are able to bypass rating cuts, allowing for more extreme, gore-heavy content that would most certainly be forced into an NC-17 or heavily edited R rating. But these films wouldn't feel the same. Same violence, different tolerance. Predator, a sci-fi horror franchise known for extreme gore, gets stripped down because of silly, illogical rules.
Come on, kill me, I'm here! Come on, do it now!
A prime example is the most recent entry, Predator Badlands. In this flick, bodies get shredded, spines get ripped out, and there's blood everywhere. However, it's framed as world logic, mythical combat, and monster-on-monster / robot violence. The blood isn't red. It's white robot fluid and green predator blood. So as long as it's not red blood, it's fine.
Really? Really?
In Friday the 13th Part 7, we have a woman in a sleeping bag. Just think about that. How vulnerable you are when you're in a sleeping bag. She's hit against a tree. No myth, no distance. Just a person being brutalized. The MPAA has always been afraid of the latter. So here's some cultural context, a little bit of acknowledgement and offense. In the 80s, the MPAA faced a lot of parental pressure. There was also the Reagan-era moral panic. It all amounted to a fear of slashers being marketed to teens. None of that explains why identical violence was treated differently depending on the genre. Can you explain it? Because I can't. Long-term damage. The MPAA didn't just censor scenes. It rewrote horror survival strategy. Studios learned to disguise violence in different ways. 90s horror pivoted to meta-commentary, more psychological dread. They used jump scares a lot more too. Eventually, raw splatter became financially radioactive. Horror didn't lose to the MPAA. It adapted for survival. Jason was honest about what he was. The MPAA never was. So what happened to the franchise after all the cuts? It got damaged, but it wasn't defeated. Friday the 13th lost its weapon. Time. After Part 7, the franchise didn't just lose gore. It lost the ability to linger. In the sequels after Part 7, the kills became shorter, more suggestive, and more often than not they were off-screen. Impact replaces experience. In a sense, the camera was protecting the audience. The violence still happened. You just weren't allowed to stay with it as long. This is the MPAA's rule. Internalized. Jason stops being a threat and starts being a mascot. When violence is no longer intimate, Jason becomes iconic, performative, and predictable. The kills start to become plot beats, not horrific moments. Are you starting to see the difference? The result? Jason isn't something happening to people anymore. He's something happening in between the scenes with people. That's a huge total shift. The franchise started chasing gimmicks instead of fear. Let's take a look at the post-Part 7 era, shall we? Jason Takes Manhattan, 1988. Spectacle over terror. Icon is greater than atmosphere. Jason Goes to Hell, 1993. Entirely lore-heavy, with the mythology pushed first and foremost. This brings the brutal kills to a whole new level. It's a borderline fantasy movie. Jason X, 2001. It's a total sci-fi parody, full of self-awareness. These are creative evolutions, so much escape routes. The franchise isn't even taking itself seriously anymore.
Interestingly enough, the sleeping bag kill was spoofed in this film. The same situation happens. A person gets slammed against the tree in a sleeping bag, but because of the comedic tone, it's deemed as acceptable. Now that's funny.
He's done with the campers.
So what's the key insight here? When you can't make violence uncomfortable, you make it feel novel. This was the unspoken lesson studios learned. Friday the 13th became a warning label inside Hollywood. The studios learned. Don't make violence feel personal. Don't let scenes linger. Don't trap the audience inside helplessness. This adds distance. They also added more humor, more lore, more irony, and a bigger sense of scale. In other words, more spectacle. Wide shots are used more frequently than close-ups now. This isn't just about one franchise. It's about an entire genre, adapting to survive. Freddy vs. Jason, 2003. The cartoon level of violence is more comical than serious or intimate. Most violence is between two mythical characters, too. The people aren't even the main characters. Friday the 13th didn't get softer. It got safer. Friday the 13th, 2009 remake. This went back to basics. This film received an initial X rating, or was threatened with one, for its original cut, requiring multiple submissions and cuts to reach the film's R-rated version released in theaters, much like the original. The film featured a faster, more brutal Jason Voorhees, with scenes that were, at the time, considered some of the most violent in the franchise. The ultimate irony? By the time the MPAA loosened up, slasher culture already changed. Audiences have been desensitized. Studios no longer wanted the intimacy. So when later films try to go harder for the R rating, the violence feels gimmicky and emotionally thin. So the MPAA never told Friday the 13th what it couldn't show. It just says when it was too much. It taught what it couldn't make you feel. And once the franchise learned that lesson, it never unlearned it, twisting the knife back around. So the system never disappeared, it just got quieter. Horror learned a lesson first. Everything else followed. The MPAA never censored violence based on extremity. It censored violence based on whether or not the audience might feel trapped inside of it. It's about why the violence now is loud but hollow, why discomfort is treated as danger, why intimacy scares institutions more than brutality. So, I hope you enjoyed this Friday the 13th edition of Mr. Flister Show. What's your favorite Friday the 13th kill? Leave comments below and we can talk about it. Did you know there's 3 Friday the 13th this year? So stay tuned for 2 more videos in March and November. Happy Friday the 13th! If you like what you see and you want to see more, I'll leave a link below for my other Friday the 13th videos. Enjoy! If you loved this video, you can follow it up with my article on horrorpost.com. It's an in-depth look about the subject matter. And remember, Jason may have won the mask, but the MPAA was the real slasher villain. So, until next time.
I'll see you at the movies.
Have a great day. Did you know that I'm a film critic for HorrorBuzz.com? You can read my reviews on their website, so I'll leave links below for that too.
Ha ha ha!